people attending. We're going to open up the back community meeting room. If the issue is, depending on how late this goes, there is a meeting there at 3 o'clock, so we'll have to clear people out by 2:45. But if we open up the back room, do we have people interested to go at least back there and sit down? Or do you all want to be in here together as a united front? I just feel bad for people that have to stand.
We do have some management people here too. My park manager's here.
They unite also. Okay, well, no, we'll open it up and we can open the blinds, and if those who choose to go back there are welcome, but then we'll clear them back out at 2:30.
We let people sit in these chairs, or is that not? I'm just worried about some of them.
I know. She is opening up the back room though, and we've got plenty of chairs back there. If you going, at least they have a choice not to stand the whole time.
I had one cup of coffee this morning. I don't think it would.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd ask that everyone take a seat or quiet down. We're going to go ahead and start the MRRC Biennial Review. First, we're going to do a call to order.
Commissioner Allen?
I didn't know the buttons there. I call to order on this thing.
No, just say here.
Here.
Commissioner Chu?
Present.
Commissioner Regan?
Here.
Vice Chair Miller?
Here.
And Chairperson Gomez?
Here. Okay, I would like everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, since the rent administrator's already done roll call, we're going to go into public comment. So before that, if you wish to make a public comment, you would get fill out a speaker card and then hand it to one of the clerks up at the front. Everyone is going to get 2 minutes on, because we do have a lot of items. So you will be able to comment on each item. If you decided that you were going to comment on each item, you will get 2 minutes to do so. What we're going to do is have you come up when we do the first item, and whoever is going to speak on that item come up, and they have 2 minutes to speak. And then if you're speaking on another item, I would just ask that you kind of hang around so that I can call you up for any additional items that you wanted to speak on.
So just to clarify, there is public meeting or public comment on the agenda, and that would be for people that are here that don't want to speak in regards to the minutes or anything relating to the biennial review. That would be the general public comment. Then the idea is that we would go through, there are 15 items that are part of the biennial review, and we'll take one at a time. I'll do the introduction and brief presentation along with the attorney, Amy Grayson. Then staff will pause. Then Chairperson Gomez will call up those interested in talking about the items as we go through the items. The commission will then close all comment and then have a discussion and hopefully give us action that then we'll take to the city council. So there are 15 items. Some people have documented that they'd like to speak on all 15. So when we do item 1, the chairperson will call out, okay, who's coming to the mic? And then person A and person B, you're gonna be up next, so start making yourself way down to the mic. Then they can go sit back down, because it could take a while depending on the amount of public comment, and then we'll do the same. So if that's okay, just to make sure we understand what we got going on.
Yes, and before we start, Susan Taylor, is she here? Susan Taylor?
She may have been in the back room.
Okay. Is she coming around?
Yes.
There's- And if you're speaking, if you're filling out the public comment, you really need to identify what item you want to talk on. It's not just a general, unless you're here for the introduction public comment.
Susan?
Yes.
You didn't mark which item you were coming up on, so I was actually trying to call you up to get clarification. None of the boxes were checked off. Which item did you want to speak about?
Mine's pretty much overall review, just personal comment.
So it's not on any of the items, just the, oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
It's up to
This
you.
was all something new to me. I got notified of this yesterday. And I just did a statement for myself for personal reasons and to have a voice for the people that are seniors and disabled and live in the mobile home parks.
I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and speak at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Just to let you know, Tony Schlake did want to make a general comment also, and then I think he was going to leave, but it's completely up to you on
Who?
Tony Schlake. Okay, I guess okay. Then I let her in on general.
Okay. You can continue.
Okay. My name is Susan Taylor. I live in the Hillcrest Mobile Home Park. Rent control gives seniors affordable housing. I own my home. I've been there 17 years. I'm retired. I now live alone. My spouse has passed away. As a homeowner, I have concerns over the mobile home rent adjustments and fair return policies. I don't ever want to be homeless. Please notify us when there is a mobile home, the mobile home owners about the rent review meetings. We usually learn this information from the news mirror or some people. I don't have a computer. I don't have online. So I depend on the YMRA letter or the news mirror for my information. Luckily, one of my neighbors called me and let me know. The decisions that you make have a direct impact on my life, and it also affects all the seniors and disabled people who live in the park. I thank you so much for your time and service. You're very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate your comments. So we move in agenda item number 1.
Yeah, so at this time, if you could receive and file the minutes on the agenda.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
You second that motion?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? No, they all said aye.
So Jennifer, were you going to move to subject?
Yeah, I'll start with
Number
the
one.
biennial review,
Okay.
which is agenda item number 2. So just a little background. I know, we got a lot of phone calls today, and we saw a lot on social media. And what today is about, it's about the biennial review of the ordinance and rules. And this is pursuant to the guidelines stated in the documents that we're to review the documents every odd number of years. This isn't a special rent adjustment case, an MNOI case, a fair return case. It has nothing to do with that. So the information that some people saw on social media is downright fake news. Sorry. It's really about just reviewing the documents. We sent out the notice to the stakeholders like we've done in the past, and got their input on items that they would like to see changed, amended, clarified. And so that's what today is about, for you as a commission to review each item. And then based on your input, the city staff will then present the documents to the council for final determination and ruling. Since the last biennial review in 2020, we have had one rent adjustment application that was in addition to the annual adjustment. The annual adjustment right now is 80% of CPI with a 4% cap. And that is determined by the city every year. Then the parks and residents are noticed. In the special rent adjustment that is up on the screen for everybody to see, and it wasn't my intent to kill everyone death by PowerPoint, but I figured a lot of people may not have the document, so I did add a lot of information to the slides today so that they can read it along as we go. But it was a Valley View Mobile Home Park. It was approved in September 2020. And the increase based on the commission determination was the rents were increased $60.21, and then they had a charge of $15.66 that went for a period, that will be in a period of 5 years. The residents were noticed after the commission determination. The case was not appealed to council. They received the 90-day notice, and then the base rents in that park were adjusted by $60.21. As far as the biennial review today, we notified the various stakeholders, as I previously said, and we received 11 responses on items and issues that they would like you to consider. There are 15 items before the commission, and we'll present them to you today. So the first one, if we're gonna go based on the commission determination, is I will just present the first item, which is the annual adjustments. The review of the annual adjustments has been brought before the commission and councils for at least the past 16 years. This is not a new topic. The ordinance authorizes the park owners to raise their rents, like I said, either 80% or 4% cap, which was amended as part of the 2017 biennial review of the current space rent, whichever is less. The chart on page 6 of your packet, which is the number in the middle of the page of your paper document or electronic document, shows the CPI increases between 2015 and 2022. And we also listed a hypothetical example using 80% and 100% CPI, just so that you can have reference. And if you look at the screen, you'll notice this year, as we're all experiencing with inflation, the CPI was quite high. 6.32 would have been 80% of the CPI, but because we have that cap of 4%, the park owners were restricted to the 4% of CPI. Right now, I can tell you CPI is 10%. But when we did the snapshot of time, the full CPI was 7.90. 80% would have been 6.32, but we have that cap threshold, so the park owners were entitled to the 4%. The hypothetical, as I stated, is listed on page 11. In addition, because it was brought up by one of the stakeholders in 2017, we also had Dr. Bard do an analysis of the impact of 100% of CPI annual increase standard from 1996 to 2009 would have been an allowable rent increase application that came before the commission in regards to Yucaipa Village. It was a fair return case. Based on the analysis that was conducted by Ken Barr, who is the city's fair return expert that we bring here to present to you as something that the council can consider, or the commission. If at the time we allowed 100% CPI, it would have made a difference. Instead of a rate increase of 81.29, it would have meant the increase would have been 61.16, which is a difference of $20.13. Barr also concluded that assuming that the operating expenses will increase at the same rate as the CPI, the limit on annual adjustment increases to 80% of the CPI increases the likelihood that in future years there will be more fair return petitions and that greater fair return increases would be justified. And we get to the slide that, as you recall, a part of the commission training that Amy put on, I think 6 to 9 months ago. You can see when an MNOI or an NOI is warranted. On the left here, you can see in this case that it would be warranted. And on the right is when they are not. The difference is that in the current year, you're probably better to speak on this one, but if the current year NOI is greater than the park current year entitlement, then this is when they get the increase. Like we just said that Valley View got the $60. We're only bringing this up to show that depending on, this is a perfect year with that cap. Inflation went high. I don't know if park owners are gonna apply for a special rent adjustment. I hope not, because we all can attest here, and it was stated in the stakeholder comments, it's painful. It's painful for the residents that are here. It's painful for the park owners and park managers that live on the site, Rudricks, Mitch Emerson. They've all talked about they live in the parks, right? It's that relationship within there. We're just presenting both sides, and that's what we are here to do. We are a neutral body, and so is the commission. We're just trying to give the facts and information on what happens when there's a restriction on the consumer price index and how sometimes it could lead to a special rent adjustment. That's all we're trying to inform people of. And the question out there tends to be, and trust me, after each case we've had, since I've done rent control since 2004, is meeting with the individual residents living in that park who has gone through a special rent adjustment, and they're standing there and they're so upset at our counter because they didn't expect a $60 or an $80 increase, and they far would have preferred to have smaller incremental adjustments that are typically CPI. Like I said, we've brought this issue before the commission and council for the past 16 years. 80% has held every single time. But with inflation and what we have going on right now, it's just something that we're having you consider because it was brought up by the various stakeholders listed in the staff report. Oh, sure. Okay, definitely. I apologize for that. Sorry, you guys.
Could
I
I
have
just,
to repeat myself because I don't know if I can.
could I just ask a question?
Sure.
How many park owners are here? I mean, actual park owners, so just raise your hand.
You have not only park owners here, you also have their park owner representatives, which is met in WMA.
I don't want their representative. I want to know how many people actually own a park. I don't care about the representatives that showed up. What is your main concern, sir? Could I ask him a
No,
question?
no.
Okay.
No. And if he wants to speak during public comment, he can. Okay, so there are 5 items or options that the commission may want to consider and that have been presented by the various stakeholders, and some have been just put in as options created by staff and or something that you suggest. Option 1 is that you increase CPI by 100% and cap it at 4, 5, or 6. In the past, it has been 5 prior to 2017. Option number 2 is 100% of the increase in CPI and eliminate the cap. Option 3 is maintain, or actually 80% increase in CPI or 4% of the current space rent, whichever is less, and include a minimum percentage increase of 2%. And what that is trying to do is address CPI, like in 2015 and 14, it was very low. Some parks at the time chose not even to implement the CPI because it was low at that time. So one of the suggestions was to do at least a minimum. Option 4 is to retain the current language, which is 80% CPI with a 4% cap. And option 5 would be other possibilities that are suggested by the commission. At this time, I'll lean back and allow public comment to occur.
Okay, so the first person I'm going to call is Raina Carmichael. And just to remind you, Raina, you have 2 minutes to talk about this topic.
I'll do my best. Good afternoon. My name is Raina Carmichael, and I'm a resident of Wishing Well Mobile Home Park on 5th Street. It's one of the oldest, if not the oldest park in Yucaipa. And in the 25 years I've lived in the park, it's been sold 4 times. Our latest owner owns 4 parks in Yucaipa, and he recently purchased a hitching post on the boulevard. In our park, the new owner is moving in red-tagged, dilapidated mobiles, which he then renovates and rents. The 2-bedroom across the street from me rents for $1,700 a month. Around the corner, a 3-bedroom is $2,000 a month. We here are gasping at these rents, but the city is not. Also, keep in mind, this is a senior park with many of the residents on fixed incomes. You might imagine that residents might benefit in some way since the rents are now sky high, like maybe an improvement in the park's facilities or amenities. The reality is we are benefiting less than ever before. Our swimming pool, an amenity we pay for, is a huge puddle of green scum. There is also no maintenance of the common areas with building and debris everywhere. It is the residents who sweep and water down the common areas. And after much pleading, our clubhouse was finally opened, but with no maintenance. It is the residents who clean the clubhouse. We even mop the floors. The last time we asked about someone cleaning our clubhouse, we were told they were working on it. That was in December. Yet here we are faced with the reality that we are being asked to pay more to receive less and less. If you live in Wishing Well as I do, or in one of the many other substandard parks in Yucaipa, you are feeling outraged and supremely pissed that you are being asked to pay more. People here are not asking for your sympathy, just your common sense. Who do you know that willingly pays more to receive less? Thank you.
Wait. While you call up the next person, if you want to call them up, I'd like to respond to that just real quick.
Yeah.
Here's the response. There's two issues. The biennial review and the ordinance is for people who are in rent control who own the title of their coach. If you are renting, you do not own the title of the coach. The ordinance has nothing to do with you. It doesn't apply to you. Rent control, Raina, rent control, and Shirley she agrees, rent control are for people, private residents that own the title of their coach. If you rent or you're doing a rent to own, you are not under rent control, and this ordinance nor the rules apply to you whatsoever. So I just want to make sure you clearly understand what the ordinance and rules are about. Well, people that are in a lease or a rent. I'm just trying to clarify what rent control, who it qualifies for. If someone's going to be renting a coach that is owned by the park owner, it's a private lease, it's a private document, a contract. The city has no weight in that whatsoever.
You're out of line. That's all I can say. You have no business commenting behind me. None. You don't usually do that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I would like to call the next person for public comment. It's Ms. Shirley Dalton.
Good morning. Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, I'm the chairman of the Yucaipa Mobile Home Residents Association, so I'm very happy to be here and to meet all of you. You have a statement that I submitted prior to this commission meeting that is included in your agenda packet. And I also gave you another statement, which is a summary of the positions that YMRA is presenting today. As usual, as Jennifer mentioned, park owners and their representatives are asking for annual rent increases of 100% CPI, some with no cap. If the rent stabilization ordinance in Yucaipa is so onerous that they need to keep asking for an increase in the rent, why do they keep buying parks in the city? They state the increase is needed to meet rising park expenses and allow monies to be set aside for capital improvements. If owners want the 100% CPI increase in order to provide for capital improvements, then they don't need the current provision for passing these costs through to the residents. As mentioned by one of the stakeholders, MHET, in their written presentation, California last year passed a law limiting increases on residential rentals in the state to 5% plus CPI, but neglected to mention there's a 10% cap on that. And the law does not apply to mobile home parks. In July, they did pass a law that applies to some mobile home parks. It allows an increase of 3% plus CPI with a cap of 5%. Not too different from what Yucaipa has. The law does not apply to parks in Yucaipa. If it did...
I'm sorry, ma'am, to cut you off, but that's all the time you have.
I would only want to mention that...
Ma'am, please, you have to be respectful of everyone's time. Everyone gets 2 minutes.
Okay,
And
you have
I'm
my
sorry,
packet. You can read what I was going to say.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to call Joe Sutton.
Good Good afternoon. My name is Jo Sutton. I thank you all for being here. We need a rent control commission. I support option 4, no change in the ordinance. I do want to remind you all that to please be aware that there are 3 distinct factions involved in and impacted by the biennial review of the rent control ordinance. The city of Yucaipa is represented by a host of city staff members and various professional consultants hired by the city. Naturally, their prime objective is to help the city fulfill its responsibility to its citizens while preventing unnecessary expenditures and avoiding costly litigation. The second group is composed of the park owners and their representatives and consultants, all of whom are well-paid professional people. Their goal, as is the case with all businesses, is to maximize profits and achieve a fair return on their investments, which may amount into the millions of dollars. Of course, the third group is mobile home residents. Since the majority of mobile home residents hover somewhere around the poverty level, most share the same objective. They need to keep their homes affordable and protect their own comparatively small investments. The next step down the socioeconomic ladder for many of them is simply homelessness. There is only one group attempting to represent and advocate for the residents, and that group is YMRA, which is composed of volunteers from very diverse backgrounds. Most are seniors who are also trying to keep their own mobile homes affordable. The mobile home residents are clearly at a serious disadvantage in terms of available resources and competent representation. Please bear this David and Goliath scenario in mind during these proceedings. Also, please note that of the 11 written submissions from stakeholders, 9 are representing park owners' interests, 1 is from an individual resident, and only 1 is representing the residents of 3,000 rent-controlled spaces in Yucaipa. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Shipley, did you want to talk on item number 1? It looks like you marked it and then you crossed it off. I crossed it off and initialed it. Okay, I just want to clarify. So I'm going to call Miss Linda Evans up next.
Good afternoon. Mine's going to be nice and easy. I would like to ask everybody to please keep in mind that there are a majority of people. I'm in Hidden Village Park, which is a small park, but we have so many people in our park who do not get a large amount of money for Social Security. With the increase in this year's amount for our increase of rent, so many people are at the edge, and next year they're going to have to move. They will, because Social Security doesn't go up the same amount of money as increasing on our rents. And I would like everybody to please understand that those seniors have no place to go. With the homes that they can get for cheaper, they're non-existent in Yucaipa. So I hear it's a 5-year waiting period to get into one of the facilities. And I just want you to please keep in mind that not everybody is able to take and do this increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to call Robert Evans for a public comment on item number 1.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Rob Evans. I'm with Manufactured Housing Educational Trust, representing mobile home park owners in San Bernardino, Riverside, and Orange County for the past 40 years. I think one of the things that everyone agrees on is that the residents, the city, the park owners all agree the best course is to find ways to avoid MNOIs, because I mean, $85 a month increases a lot. So if we can kind of make the work a little better for everybody, that would be much improved, spread it over the time. So obviously, we always ask for 100% of CPI. Just as Dr. Barr indicated, limiting it to 80%. And then especially like this year, it's going to be basically 50% and probably again next year based on the high consumer price index. So we're just going to keep moving things forward to where we're going to have to put in for special requests for a rent increase. And that's not, it doesn't make anybody happy. So as the previous speaker mentioned, we also brought up AB 1482, which passed a law that said CPI plus 5%. So again, we're just asking for CPI. And/or it was kind of interesting that lower button 2% being added, because like this year at 4%, we're missing out on the cost of doing business is going way faster than what the rents are doing. So I think that is it for item number 1. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Wish the seat was higher. I'm going to call next Julie Pauley.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Julie Polly with the WMA. We represent mobile home park owners throughout California. And I'm not going to be able to stay for the entire hearing. It's running long, so I probably will just use this one time to kind of summarize my comments on all of them. But not to be repetitive of Mr. Evans, but your one guiding principle as commissioners should be how to limit these hearings. I think you should take Ms. Crawford's words to heart when she talks about how hard they are on residents when they expect a predictable low increase and to get hit with $75 a month because of this ordinance, with $15 of it going to attorneys to pay for attorneys and experts. It's broken. And you can fix it. And we're not asking to get rid of, park owners are not asking to get rid of the ordinance. There are regulations we can live with. But I would argue what you have currently isn't working. And so 100% of CPI would be a good start. The index in the Inland Empire has a new index in the last 2 years, and it is considerably higher than neighboring San Diego and LA, Orange County indexes. So the true rate of inflation in the Inland Empire is about 10%, like Ms. Crawford had mentioned. So when we get a 4% rent increase, that is really a rent decrease. And I know it doesn't feel that way to the residents in the room, but that's the reality. And that drives hearings. That continues for us to have to come in here and for the math to work out in the park owner's favor and for it to be harsher. So I hope that you would consider 100% of CPI, and maybe we can start the dialogue of having a floor and a ceiling so that it's predictable for the folks that really do rely on a low rent, and it's manageable for park owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to call Tony, is it Slake? I'm sorry about that.
My name's Tony Slake. I'm the former chairman of Yucaipa Mobile Home Residents Association. Thank you for your time and consideration today. Issues are pretty integrated or connected. Much of what you'll hear today are arguments from the park owner community about how unfair the Yucaipa ordinance is in some way. Park owners currently receive basically automatic rent increases of the lesser of 80% of the consumer price index, or CPI, or 4%. Park owners will argue it's not fair because at 80%, how can they possibly keep up with inflation? What you'll most likely not hear is that capital improvements are stripped out of this. In other words, when a $500,000 street improvement is done, the residents pay for that. The same goes for basically all improvements in the park. The residents do pay for that. If the ordinance were changed or allowed to increase the CPI amount, residents should no longer be required to pay for the capital improvements. And when it comes to capital improvements, because the residents do pay for these, there needs to be oversight and accountability and not automatic pass-throughs. On an added note, when inflation runs hot, park values climb almost exponentially. Add inflation to a multi-million-dollar park, which they all are, and consider those gains. Currently, the 4% cap protects from large rent increases while park owners enjoy massive gains in equity. Lastly, the ordinance is structured to guarantee a fair profit to park owners. They have the right to come before the city and make their case for a rent increase outside of the basic ordinance. They are never just locked into the 80%. They have options. It's a great option. It's fair for owners, and it also protects the residents. Should not be changed, and I'm asking that you maintain the ordinance as it is in this area. Option number 4, no change. Thank you very much.
Harold Foster.
Thank you. Believe me, I empathize with your position. You're between a rock and a hard place. Here's the reality. Here's the reality. This is my first time. Everybody here is affected by inflation, CPI, or any of that, whatever initials it may have. Costs are going up across the board for everybody. That's a reality, except for Social Security checks. They are going up. I've been on Social Security for 13 years. You do the math. It hadn't doubled. It hadn't gone up much. It hasn't gone up 4% in all that time. It's not 4% better than it was 13 years ago. I'm here to tell you that the 4% cap is insanity. The rule of 72, math rule of 72 states that at 4%, it's going to double in 18 years. That's an eviction notice. When you move into a senior park at the age of 55, your rent's going to be doubled 18 years later. That means move in at 55, move out at 70. Where to? Are you going to euthanize them? We have, our homeless quota is full. We have no senior homes. The whole country is crying about affordable housing. All you're left with is a responsibility. The responsibility to create a win-win situation. These new park owners knew the numbers better than these park residents when they bought their park.
Sir, I'm sorry, that's all the time you have.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last public comment on item number 1. So I'm just going to move for the commission to discuss.
May I?
Yes, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to comment, just clarify, AB 978, which was mentioned, does not apply to cities that have mobile home parks that are only within the city. It's a special bill that was enacted because there's a unique mobile home park that is covering 2 boundaries between 2 cities. And so that percentage increase that was mentioned doesn't have any application in the city. I just wanted to clarify that.
So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion on item number 1.
Would you want to do a discussion, then a motion?
Oh, yeah, I guess. Would you like to go first?
I make a motion, we leave the option 4 in place as it is. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking if you have any discussion. You can also make comments about what you've heard here and, a discussion. That's,
Well, I've heard a lot of good comments, and Social Security, if you're on Social Security, you can't go someplace and ask for a 4% or 5% or 10% increase. It's there, and it doesn't go up. And I had my wife, before she passed away, was on Social Security, and she'd get an increase, and Medicare would take that away. So you're almost at a negative at the end of the year. I mean, I don't want to paint no doom and gloom, but I understand what some of these people are saying. Park owners, there are a lot of things that park owners could do, because I do insurance work around in and out of park owners, and I see some things that they could do to increase their profit tremendously without even raising the rent. And I'll give you a good example. How many times you go in a park and somebody's got the lights on at 10 o'clock in the morning? It's burning power. You could go down in the park and I see them, and there's a sprinkler system gushing. Somebody's got to control those timers on those things. And if they cut the power and do all of that maintenance stuff that they're supposed to do, their profits would go up. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
thank you. Bob, you have any comment?
Thank you, staff, Mrs. Crawford and Amy. And I just want to be clear that it's the motion then discussion, or discussion then the motion?
Discussion, then motion.
Okay.
And
That's all
I
right.
just, if I could, Chair, I love that people are applauding, but I don't think typically council and the commissions don't allow the applause or the comments or the boos. It's just not professional, and then it keeps the meeting moving, but ultimately it's up to you.
Thank you for that clarification. First of all, it's my first commission meeting, and I've served in public service for over 30 years, so I come at it from a staff perspective. I'm a retired police chief and did a little time as city manager, and then I teach at Cal State San Bernardino in retirement on public policy and public administration. So I always wondered if I'd sit on this side one day and have to make policy decisions. But I look out in the audience and I see some beautiful people in our town that everybody's struggling right now. Look what's going on in our community. Look what's going on nationally. Everything costs more. Clearly tough for everyone. Some people can afford it more than others. I have a special place in my heart, honestly, for seniors and things they have to deal with later in life. So I just wanted to say I'm going to second the motion, and I'm proud to be here, and I understand everything you may be feeling today, but I also understand there's a little bit of a paradox here, because owners want a return on investment, clearly, right? So the paradox is we want to get to the same place where you have a safe, affordable community that's clean and doesn't cause maybe any kind of issues or calls for service in the police department or anything. And the owners, they do want to return on investment to keep it nice and keep it up so people have a good quality of life where they live. That's the American dream. There's nothing the matter with that. So it's a paradox, but I think you're trying to get to the same goal, is a nice place to live that's affordable. So Jennifer probably knew I was going to talk a little bit about that because I'd mentioned paradox to you. And again, we're just an advisory commission. Policy is made by the council, but I think we can help the council out by looking at all sides and listening and trying to help them along the way, and I think that's why we're appointed. So I second the motion to retain the existing language of the ordinance rules without change, maintain 80% CPI and 4% cap.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Chu, did you have any comments?
I have questions. I don't know if there's any housing assistance available for the senior residents if they fall into financial difficulties.
No, there isn't.
It is very difficult decision to make a motion at this point because looking at the cost of living has been jumped up drastically, and the park owner had to make enough money to maintain the park. And then, but on the other hand, majority of the senior citizens, they are under the limited income. It's hard for them too if the rents raised too much higher. So one suggestion that I don't know if the city have ever done that, they make a survey of the average residents at the mobile home park and see, so we can look at their financial situations, how much they can afford for the increase.
Commissioner Regan, do you want to go ahead and make a comment?
I guess the only thing I'm curious about is, am I missing all the numbers that's showing how much profit they're making and what they're bringing in every month on these parks?
No.
Because I kind of hear
We
like
weren't
sympathy
provided
about
anything
cost
like
of
that.
increase for the park owners, and I get it. Well, everything almost doubled in the last 2 years for. Right. So. Do they open their books so we're able to see how hard it is and their hardship compared to the residents in the park and their social security and their hardship?
That's nothing that they would provide at this biannual review for us to look at.
Unless we search it ourselves. Oh. Well, I got an opinion with number 4. Thank you.
So did you want to make a motion, or are you still trying to
I agree with
decide?
number 4.
You have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Allen and a second by Vice Chair Miller.
I'm sorry, not a motion. Did you want to vote? I'm sorry.
Yeah, vote for 4.
I also agree with option number 4. With the mobile home park owners, I understand inflation, but your property values have doubled. So that's something that's not happening with the mobile home park. With the residents, they're not getting an increase in their social security. I know that they haven't. Most of the time, if they do get an increase, the Medicare increases also, so it's like they're not even getting anything extra. I'm not really seeing any reason why it should be 100 CPI. I've actually been at the last biannual review, and I didn't really, the inflation issue wasn't a big deal, and inflation's gonna happen. You invested in these parks, and you knew what you were buying, and I don't think that the residents should have to pay because you made a bad financial decision. So I also, like I said, agree with number 4. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and, Jennifer, if you can just get a tally. I don't think Mr. Chu actually had voted.
Well, there's a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor for option number 4, retaining existing?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. That's it. Right, Mr. Chu? You voted in favor of retaining existing. You need to speak into the mic. Okay, so I'm going to do it this way. So motion and second to retain the current language with 80% of CPI with a cap of 4%. Commissioner Allen, can you vote into the mic?
Yes, I vote for option 4.
Commissioner Chu?
No comment. No decision. No decision yet.
So he's going to abstain?
Oh. Okay, look at order number 4 is that, like I said, I cannot make a concrete decision at this point.
Okay,
But
so you
with
want to
the-
abstain?
But as looking at the situation, and then I would probably will go along with that.
Do you want to abstain from
Number f-
voting? You don't have to choose what we choose. If you want to abstain from voting, you can do that. That's within your right to do that. You don't, I don't want you to sit up here and feel like you have to make a decision if you don't just abstain from this particular item.
No, I cannot. I won't. I'm
So
not
you're
agree with that.
abstaining.
Yeah.
Commissioner Regan,
I agree with 4.
Vice Chairperson Miller,
I vote for option 4 as listed.
Chairperson Gomez.
I vote for option 4.
Okay, just to clarify, option 4 is to retain current 80% CPI, 4% cap.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so now we're going to move on to agenda item number 2.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So item number 2 is to discuss what we refer to as long-term leases. A long-term lease, for purposes of our discussion, is a rental agreement or lease that is more than 12 months duration. Under Civil Code Section 798.17, which is part of the mobile home residency law, for many years, that statute has provided that any space subject to a long-term lease is exempt from rent control for the term of the lease. Then, once that lease expires or terminates, the space would come under any applicable rent control ordinance, and the last rent in effect under that lease becomes the initial base rent for purposes of rent control and is then increased from thereafter. In effective January 1, 2021, the legislature adopted and the governor signed into law AB 2782. The intent of AB 2782 is to phase out the long-term lease exemption, and so it amended 798.17, and what it does is essentially preclude the park owner from entering into leases or extending leases after February 13, 2020, that would exempt the space from rent control. In addition, any existing long-term lease that has an expiration date at some point in the future, that term of the lease will not exempt the space from rent control after January 1, 2025. So with the effect of that, spaces that have previously been exempt from the ordinance will start, if not already, they will start coming out of that exemption and they will be subject to the ordinance. Some of the stakeholders have asked the city to consider adopting as part of an amendment to the ordinance to continue to allow spaces subject to long-term leases to be exempt from the ordinance. Staff does not make any recommendation in support of that, but we do provide it to you for your discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move to public comment for item number 2. I'm going to start with Ms. Shirley Dalton.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Based on current California law, there should be no exemption after the 2025 date that staff referred to. So I recommend that we do not make any changes to the ordinance as requested by stakeholders.
Thank you, Shirley. Next, I'm going to call Ms. Jo Sutton. So I'm going to call Mr. Robert Evans.
Okay, so again, yeah, on AB 2782, they're gonna put long-term leases exempt anyway in January 1, 2025. So we would ask that those residents that sign long-term leases with the parks and agreed to what those were, keep those into effect. It actually will save them money because then we don't have to pay for the whatchamacallit? The admin fee and all that, and with the city. So it actually keeps them a little bit lower.
I heard there.
And that's, so we'd like them to keep their long-term leases.
I'm going to call Julie Pauley. Okay, now I'm going to just open up for discussion between the commission. Commissioner Allen, did you have any discussion before you?
Long-term lease, does that get a piece of paper saying they got a lease for X amount of number of years or something? Because I don't know anything about that on the
Yes.
thing. And because, do long-term lease people get bumped up rent on a monthly basis or every 6 months? Or is it sort of tied to whatever the general raise is in the mobile home park?
So a lease is a contract between the park owner and the resident has a right, if they own the title of the coach, they have the option of signing a long-term lease that exempts them out of rent control, that establishes the annual adjustments or whatever terms and conditions. It's a contract.
Okay.
And prior to the legislation changing, some were 10-year, 25, 35-year leases.
I'd like to see long-term leases discontinued.
Well, this has nothing to do with the length and term of the lease. The lease can stay in play,
but
however,
I
it's
mean-
just about the rent of the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm totally in the dark about that, so.
Commissioner Miller?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we do not recommend any changes to the ordinance or rules relating to space subject to long-term leases this time.
Commissioner Regan?
I second that.
I agree with, I agree with Commissioner Randy. Yeah, that we should continue with that long-term lease. I just said that I agree with Commissioner Randy saying that we should continue with the long-term lease after 2025.
So the recommendation on the screen is staff does not recommend any changes to the ordinance or rules relating to spaces subject to long-term lease. Is
I
that
agree
your
with
Yes.
motion?
Yes.
Okay. and
I believe
Mr. Reagan?
Commissioner Miller motioned first, so, but I'll second that motion as well. Or did you
Regan
second?
already
Regan,
did.
I'm sorry.
So basically, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, item number 3.
So item number 3, I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment.
We have the staff presentation first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself.
The first, we have several items dealing with what the ordinance refers to as vacant spaces. As most of you know, the ordinance is very strict when space rent can be raised upon a vacancy. For purposes of this item, we are talking about in-place transfers. And what that means, as set out on the slide, it's a vacancy resulting from the sale, transfer, or other conveyance of a mobile home when a park resident replaces that home because it's been destroyed by fire or they just want a new home. They continue to live in the park, but the home itself changes. In addition, sometimes people pass away and their heirs inherit their home. That's also considered an in-place transfer. And then in other cases, there may be a transfer of the ownership of the home to the park owner or to a creditor who then turns around and sells it to a resident. So this slide, I'm not going to go over all these, but these are the 7 categories of vacancy as used in the ordinance. For our purposes, we are dealing with number 5, any change in occupancy of a mobile home on the same space. That's not right. I'm sorry, number 4, I can't see. Any in-place transfer of a mobile home, that's what we are talking about. So, okay. So, as I said, currently, there are no increases allowed for an in-place transfer or where the occupancy of that mobile home changes, such as through inheritance, or if you bring in a new mobile home, but you continue to live there. The ordinance, in contrast, for certain other kinds of vacancies, and 3 of them are listed, does allow a limited rent increase, which is defined at the bottom of the slide. If there's an existing home, if there's an existing resident who leaves the park and a new resident comes in and brings their own mobile home onto the space, as an example, the park owner can increase the last rent that was in effect with the prior resident by either the combined average of the rent-controlled space rents plus 10% or $35, whichever is less. So we're not very coordinated over here. Items 1, 2, and 3 are the situations where this increase, either the combined average plus 10% or $35, will come into play. So with respect to in-place transfers, some of the stakeholders have asked that on an in-place transfer, the city allow an increase to market rent. But then everything else would stay the same. So if a mobile home is moved off and the resident moves in a new home, that rent would go up to market rent, essentially. That's the proposal that was submitted to the city. Option number 2 is similar, that the rent would be increased to market rent, but there would be some kind of limitation, either a percentage limit based on what the current rent is or a dollar amount. But again, all the other provisions of the ordinance would remain the same. The third option is to leave the ordinance as is, as to in-place transfers, not make any change, and just continue the same way the ordinance has gone currently. And staff's does not make any, is not in support of any change on in-place transfers and recommends that the ordinance and rules be left as is.
At this time, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment on item number 3. So, Ms. Dalton.
You're going to be seeing me frequently. I have only one problem with this adjustment, and that is the argument that they want to bring it up to market rent. Who is going to determine what current market rent is? None of the stakeholders who requested this have presented a formula for calculating current market rent. In Yucaipa, the rate can vary within a park. The space rent can vary within a park by as much as $300 from one space to another. The low rent in the city of Yucaipa is $228. The highest, $650. That's as of April 2022. How are you going to determine current market rent? And how is a buyer supposed to know what is fair? They're not going to. For that reason alone, I recommend no change to the ordinance.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton. So you know, every time Shirley starts sitting down, you might as well start standing up.
Mine is short. I recommend no changes.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, Robert Evans.
Thank you. So, yeah, vacancy decontrol would help also not bringing in those MNOI special hearings because you're gonna get, the space is gonna move up to market. I know you mentioned, the previous person mentioned that what's market rent? Well, market rent, for example, could be, what's the highest rent controlled space in that park? That might be the new move-in rent. Where it's set up now with the formula, it sounds like the new person moving in can actually be paying less than other people in the park. So that doesn't seem right across the board either. Plus, vacancy decontrol and getting the rent up to a higher level will help get, rejuvenate, you know, bring in new homes and fix things up and look a lot better. Your Dr. Barr, in his 2017 review, noted that some form of vacancy decontrol would reduce applications and rent adjustments. So that's one of our goals here. So that's might be a good idea to do some vacancy decontrol and help with these special rent requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was our last public comment, so I'm actually going to start with the discussion. Being that I was last year on the Mobile Home Rent Review Commission, I think the commission did make some kind of provision for the park owners to be able to increase the rents on properties that were vacant, ones that were either destroyed in a fire or if it was something that the park removed, if they moved something else in there, they were able to increase the rents on those spaces. Can't remember the exact details, but I remember something like that. So I think there is also already something in place for the park owners to recover some or bring a space up to fair market value. That being said, I recommend, or I'm going to make a motion to keep the ordinance the way it is, the language the way it stands. I'm going to go ahead and move it on to whoever wants to speak next. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I guess it's not a question to Mr. Evans, but I understand, especially if you're in this kind of a scenario, that you probably could charge more rent. I mean, if you look just what's going on in our community with just apartments, how much more it is to rent apartments, et cetera. And I guess what I'm reading back from 2020 is the ordinance, and maybe Amy, you can square me up on this, allows rents to increase at market rent level upon in-place transfer. We use to determine market rent or provision and establishing a cap. But I guess the question is that market level, you know, and how cumbersome is that going to be on the residents? So, I mean, I guess the owner could set it at, hey, whatever A is, you know, versus what maybe C would be, a more, you know, regional approach to what the rent would be. So maybe you could, what happened in 2020 when you talked about that?
Yeah, we're going to talk about, there are certain types of vacancies as they're defined where there is a limited increase allowed. That was extensively evaluated back in 2019, 2020. But I was just going to comment on the market rent issue in a grand sense. Market means whatever the market will bear. So if somebody's willing to pay $2,000 a month, plus they have their home and they want to pay $2,000 because they can afford it and they think it's a great rent, that's what the market would bear. There are various ways. I mean, the city could cap it, which was option number 2, where the city would say, okay, you can go to market rent, but capped at X% of current space rent, or capped at, I think Mr. Evans mentioned, the highest space rent in the park. But again, the point I think staff would say is this issue affects existing residents. And so traditionally, the city and the residents have been very concerned that there not be increases on existing residents whose only change is they may move a new home in or their heirs inherit the home. And so that's why staff has said we don't think that should be modified at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. I appreciate the explanation, and I second the motion.
I second the motion that it stays as it is.
I agree. Leave it as it is.
Commissioner Chu?
I would think, to be fair, I would like to, in favor, or recommended that with market rent with limitations.
As I understand it, the motion on the floor from Vice Chair Gomez, Chair Gomez, Chair Gomez, Vice Chairperson Miller, is no change to the ordinance. That's the motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those oppose? Okay. It's a 4-1. Okay, item number 4. I was just trying to get you to the slide because it
And I
was what
saw
you were
you.
trying to talk about. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
wait,
saw you too.
it's
You
the
were-
next
I was-
slide. Okay, item number 4 deals with rent adjustments upon vacancy. Vacancy resulting from voluntary abandonment or removal of the mobile home or destruction of mobile home and voluntary termination of tenancy. This is an item that was changed, a part of the last biennial review that Chairperson Gomez was talking about. And what the idea and the intent was to allow a base rent adjustment for new people moving into the park and or moving into Yucaipa, and attempted to increase low space rents to improve the return on investment and not impact existing rent-controlled residents in the park. That's the whole reason why we added this provision. But in analyzing how the formula would work in that park, staff has determined that new residents would always be paying less than the existing month-to-month residents, and an outcome that was not the intent of creating this vacancy adjustment methodology. The example that we cited was based on the 2022 annual registration, using the lowest rent in a rent-controlled space and applying procedures pursuant to the ordinance right now, which is basically the combined average rent of the rent-controlled space plus 10%, or $35, whichever is less. And based on that provision, then, the new person coming into the park or into the community would be paying $363.50. And the issue with that is it's lower than 63 other existing rent-controlled spaces. And even if the potential space rent would have been adjusted by the average rent-controlled spaces in 10%, which would lead them to the 461, this is no longer working, it would be lower than 13 existing spaces in that park. So out of this park that has 82 spaces, there's only a few left to where they would be paying higher rent. And I don't think staff believes that was the intent. People moving into a park or brand new to our community shouldn't be getting a better deal than the people that have been living in that park for a long time or are cleaning the, whatever they're doing in the park. And we just didn't think that was the intent. So we are bringing it before you, and we're asking you to consider whether a new or potential resident should be benefiting over an existing rent-controlled resident. And so the options before you is option 1 is to eliminate the cap of $35. We keep the same categories: abandonment, or it was destroyed by fire, or the people voluntarily removed. That's the idea, that if a new person coming in, the cap would be released and it would be based on the average plus 10%. Or option 2 is retain the language that we have, and new people get a bigger benefit than people that live there already. And so we ask that you consider the options as presented.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comments on item number 4. I have Julie Pauley first.
She left.
I keep forgetting that. I need to just put it away. Ms. Dalton?
I do understand the point that Jennifer just made about new residents benefiting over residents who have been there for a long time. But at the same time, unless you make all the rents in the park the same, someone is going to benefit and someone is not. So I recommend that it stay the same as it is currently stated.
Ms. Sutton?
I'm here. I thought I knew what I wanted, and now I don't, so whatever you guys decide.
Mr. Evans?
All right, well, we would agree with option 1 because the formula just wasn't working. And like I was previously saying, it just doesn't make sense for a new resident to move in and pay less rent than the current residents. That's not a good formula, so I appreciate that catch, and option 1 would be supported. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, there being no other, sorry.
Just briefly,
We got to reset the timer. Go ahead, sir.
I simply wanted to comment that, can you hear me now? Yes? Okay. So the comment I had was just simply that we're looking at how do we increase rent. What I find interesting is that as an investor in a park or anything else you want to put huge sums of money into, you go to a bank or some lending institution, they look at all the paperwork to see if it's going to be profitable or not profitable. And if it's not profitable, they're not going to loan you the money. And I can guarantee you there's not too many people that are shelling out the big dollars to go out and buy one of these things cash. So each and every one of them is a financed deal. That's locked in, it's figured out what you're going to make off of it before they ever buy the things. So why are we looking at ways to increase rent? Thank you.
Kim, did you have another? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just, do you? You had one though, right? You spoke earlier? What was your name, sir? Harold. All right, come on up, Harold. I'm just gonna pull your little thing and mark it off.
For the record, can you say his name into the mic so we can record it?
Harold Foster. Quick comment. There's going to be different rates in every park, and there should be an increase. You've got a good standard the way it is, the way I see it. The only reason that the park owners want to raise it is they want to raise rent anywhere they can. If a homeowner goes in and buys a mobile in a park, myself, and if I live there for 40 years and the current thing is in place, I have a valuable lease that increases the value of my property. I have an equity in that lease because I've lived there for 40 years. I can capture that equity when I resell my home because my home's going to be more valuable because the rent's cheaper. If you let him raise it to the market value, the landowner, he's stealing that equity in that land from me that I paid for 40 years, and he's gonna be able to raise that rent today. I could rent mine out, if I were allowed to rent it, for $1,500 to $2,500 a month. That's market value. I'm paying $575 a month. If that only goes up $25 when I sell it, that's valuable, as compared to someone trying to buy one and having to pay the market value of $2,500 for the rent space. So you're gonna try to take my equity away and give it to that park owner. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Just point of clarification. So what he was kind of talking about is in-place transfer. And the staff recommended that you don't do anything on that and that he wouldn't lose his equity. We're not saying anything about in-place transfer.
No, I understood.
Okay.
Yeah, I understood.
I just want to make sure, because we're not disagreeing, we agree with you. This item was basically, the coach was abandoned, it was removed voluntarily or burned down, and the pad in the park is vacant. There's no coach on it. Someone wants to come in, Mr. Miller moves into town or has never lived in a mobile home park, is interested in moving into Park X. Well, we need to determine, okay, the park calls us and they want to know what the base rent is. The formula right now in that is that they are going to be paying, because it's either the average plus 10% or $35. So in this example, if the rent is low, the max rent is going to be $35, which in the 3 next cases we're going to be presenting is a lot less than what you are paying as residents currently living there. We just, as staff, this is something raised by staff, it's not by a park owner. We just didn't think that was the intent. Why should existing residents that have lived there for years pay more than someone who has an opportunity to choose to live in that park at that time? If they don't like the rent, they don't have to move in, but at least it's valued more than the residents currently living there. That was the idea, but if the commission wants to keep it as is, we'll keep it as is.
Well, this is what I was trying to explain before, is that there wasn't anything in place before. When I was on this commission last year, when we voted on it, it was the intent that it wasn't going to affect any of the current park residents. This is somebody completely new coming in. It's not going to change anything with where you're living, and still give the stakeholders the opportunity to increase the rent, and then it be subject to the rent control after that. So that's my part of the discussion. I'm going to go ahead and motion for option 1. I think that's not the intent. I was on the commission last year. That was not the intent, that a new person coming in is going to be paying less than the people who have already been there. So it is a mistake.
One comment in response to that.
Well, we can't, we've already done public comments, so I can't take a response from you.
But you're forgetting that there are people who are paying less than the new person coming in.
Understood, but when the commission voted on it, it was not in the intent. This is for new, this
So
is
that
not.
means any new person coming in is going to be paying more than everybody else in the park.
This has to do with the part, this is not going to affect any of the current residents. This is why we had it in place.
Then you are going to be increasing exponentially the differential between the high and the low rents. It's already now, you can go to one park and there's $300 difference between the high and the low within one park.
Ma'am, it's our time to speak, so the commissioners, it's our opportunity. You had your opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I'd like to second the motion to go with option number 1, to eliminate cap $35 space rents, increase base combined average of rent control spaces in the park for vacancies resulting from the categories listed, but retain all other existing ordinance language.
Commissioner Miller?
I go with option 1.
I'm sorry, Alan. Commissioner Regan?
From what I understand of this is actually like better for both sides if you actually think about it, because the people that live there now and are able to sell, what it does is it increases your value of your place because the fair market value in the other spaces, it increases your equity. It makes it fair for the park owners to where they're able to get fair market value for somebody that is no longer connected to the park. This whole, from what I understand, this whole board was to help protect the community and protect the ones that we have here who are stuck on the Social Security and will be cast onto the street if they're able to jump everybody's rent up. Well, this is for people that don't live in there. This is for people that don't have a home there, that they're not transferring over. So I see it fair for all sides, and I agree with one.
Second, what Reagan just said. Yes.
You just want to go ahead and take a vote from each.
So we have a motion by Gomez, second by Miller to recommend option number 1. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those oppose? Okay, 5-0.
A point of clarification, City Attorney. Now, for the ordinance change, it goes with the council, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
What we would do, what we normally do, once we have the commission recommendations, then we go to council. They express their consensus on each issue, and then we actually go back and craft language that would be for the ordinance and anything we need to do in the rules as well, and then bring all those back.
Okay, just to let you know, number 5 and number 6 are somewhat similar. We're all kind of talking about the same situations. Number 5 is about rent adjustment upon vacancy, adjustments on spaces that have been vacant because they have been empty for an extended period of time. This item was brought up by one of the stakeholders. The definition of vacancy, we've talked about this in the last couple of items, includes spaces that are vacant because they are voluntarily removed, destroyed by fire and flood, and abandoned. Those are the 3 categories, just like the item we just went through. During the biennial review, as I said, a stakeholder brought up an issue because he's had spaces in his park that have been vacant since 2004. And in that time, he had gone through a special rent adjustment. He is interested in allowing a new tenant to move into the park, and he wants to know what the base rent adjustment is. And pursuant to our ordinance and rules right now, it's the combined average spaces, rent-controlled spaces, plus 10% or $35, whichever is less. Well, when they came through with the special rent adjustment, that space wasn't in rent control at all. And so now he's trying to bring someone in, and they're far behind everybody else because that park received a special rent adjustment. So in this case, it is space number 16 we were talking about. The base in 2004 was $219. So when we were determining what his space rent would be, it come out to, is there a flicker? $254.19. The range right now, it doesn't work. The range right now, the average is $398.33, the low is $395.32, and the high is $410.31. So based on the current rules, if the approved space rent for a new resident who comes into space number 16 who's never lived in the park would have a base rent of $254.19, which is $144.14 less than what other residents living in Valley Breeze rent-controlled spaces are right now. So we didn't kind of realize we had this gap in our document until he approached the city, and we started looking at the contents and thought we'd bring this before you to seek your input on what you would like to do in this situation. The option is that we amend the ordinance to include a definition for a space that is vacant and empty for more than 5 consecutive years, and to provide that the base rent following the vacancy will be then determined by the combined average rent-controlled spaces in the park plus 10%, which was the example we just showed you on the previous page, and/or retain the existing language of the ordinance and rules without any changes. Stakeholder comments on this item is on page 17 of the packet. So our recommendation is that you consider the options and provide direction. They can't.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. So Ms. Dalton?
In this case, I'm going to have to go ahead, agree with the option 1 because it seems fair.
Ms. Sutton?
If I can have, just so that we can get it on the recording, we really need you to come and speak into the mic or the recorder won't pick it up. Sorry.
I support option 1.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
I'd support option 1 on items 5 and 6. It's very similar. Thank you.
Mr. Warren?
So I wanted to come and speak because I know personally, as a part of my ownership and management group, we have an enormous passion for affordable housing. And I think one of the ways that what we refer to them as are legacy residents. Multiple of our parks are senior communities, and we take great pride in keeping rents as low as possible. But there's a pendulum, right? There's a balance where we need to make sure that we're able to keep rents low while also being able to provide a clean and safe community, which also keeps the value in residents' homes as high as possible for their resale and just for their living, their ability to live. So vacancy is one of the ways in which an owner can keep the current residents as low as possible while actually being able to still better their community, keeping it as clean and safe and affordable as possible. So just, and I think it's 4, 5, and 6 are all in regarding this. I look at this as a protection and security for current residents. So I hope it seems like it is being explained properly so that people understand that this is actually for their betterment. Because an example of somebody paying $200 or $300 when everyone else is paying $600, it's very difficult for an owner to justify making that old vacant, perhaps rundown site better, which elevates the entire community around it, if they're not able to bring that to a somewhat market value. Or again, instead of market value, I think the better term that's been used is that average. I think that's probably a little easier to digest.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it up to the commission for discussion.
I vote for option 1.
Commissioner Miller? Oh, Regan.
So, Mr. Allen, was that a motion?
Yes,
Okay.
motion, I'm sorry. Motion to carry option 1.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, this one is brief. It's somewhat similar, but this is a rent adjustment upon vacancy. The vacancy adjustment on sale of park-owned mobile home to existing or new resident. Currently, the ordinance does not address rent adjustments when a park-owned mobile home is sold to a new resident. It only addresses park-owned coaches sold to an existing resident. So we are recommending, well, we have 2 options really for you. That one is if the park owner sells to a park-owned To a new resident, it would be the combined average of the rent-controlled spaces plus the 10%. And we listed an example on the slide for you. The option number 2 is that you retain the existing.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. So Ms. Dalton.
I think I said in my brief that I gave you that I had no recommendation or I supported no change. I'm going to change. I do support option 1 in this case.
Thank you. Joe Sutton.
I would agree with option 1.
Mr. Evans.
Agree as well with the correction. Thank you. Option 1.
And Mr. Warren.
Agree with option 1. I guess a little point of clarification. I know in Yucaipa and in what we're discussing, there are a lot of things regarding park-owned homes when a park owner takes over. And speaking from that side, usually that is a case where it is a old, dilapidated home that's unable to sell. So I would encourage really anything in regarding with where a park ownership comes in and takes over control, that kind of the vacancy decontrol take place, because that's in large part our ability to better and beautify the community. So option 1.
So I'm going to leave it up open for the commission to discuss. Anyone want to start?
I make a recommendation, we choose option 1.
So you're making a motion? A motion?
A motion, I'm sorry, a motion to keep option 1.
And I will second that motion for option number 1. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The next item is item number 7. One of the stakeholders requested that the city consider creating a process for a city pre-approval of a capital improvement rent adjustment, alternatively allowing automatic pass-throughs of capital improvements. If you remember, a park owner who wants to raise the rent because they do a capital improvement, they have to first go to the residents and get 51% of the residents to agree through a resident vote. If they don't get the vote, or if they don't get 51%, then the only way they can increase rents based on that capital improvement is if they can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the city that it was necessary for health and safety reasons. The second way to get an adjustment is what we crafted a few years ago, which is called an emergency capital improvement. That's basically to deal with the situation where there's some sort of natural disaster, a fire sweeps through a mobile home park, there's an earthquake, something like that that damages or destroys something critical to the operation of the park, like the water system or power, something like that, where there's no time to go through and do the capital improvement election with the residents. So we created an emergency capital improvement process which says they can go ahead and do it, but then they have to do it within a certain time of when the emergency event occurred. Then they have to come to the city, they have to go through the vote, they have to meet certain time limits so we know it's not just hanging out there over a period of time. Again, that still is a limited way for somebody to go and do a capital improvement before they get approval. So the basic request is, can they come to the city ahead of time, have the city review the proposal, say, yes, this is a capital improvement, go ahead and do it, or alternatively, just say if you do a capital improvement, you get to pass on that cost to the resident. That's okay. We did not include options because the whole rationale over time for the capital improvement rent adjustment process, this is a very sensitive topic, as most of you know. Residents have the opportunity currently to become informed and educated about a proposed capital improvement before it happens. They have the right to see the proposed information on what's going to be done, and then they have the right to say yes or no, unless it's an emergency, so that they have a say in what is eventually going to be something they have to pay for. Because of that policy concern, staff did not make any recommended changes to the ordinance.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So Ms. Dalton?
I do not think we need to make any changes to the ordinance. I do not feel that park owners should have the ability to go through city and get pre-approval without input from the residents of the park. I think that we need to keep that part, that they have, unless it's an emergency, that they have to go to the residents, inform them of what they're planning to do, and hopefully get their consent. I don't think that it should be put through without input from the residents.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton?
I think an automatic pass-through would be a big mistake, and I want you to retain the language as it is now.
Thank you. Mr. Evan?
Well, we would like to request the ordinance change and add some addition of, so that it's just come in for approval of capital improvement expenses and not have to go through the MNOI, and keep the parks well maintained. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and now open it up for the commission to discuss.
I make a recommendation, we leave it as it is, leave the ordinance as it is.
So you're making a motion?
I make a motion, sorry about that.
I'm going to get you every time. Would anyone like to second?
Write that on a piece of paper in front of me.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, item number 8 deals with the annual registration. The ordinance, since its inception, has required that park owners have to register every year at the beginning of the year. There is a registration form that the city has developed that requires information be laid out for each type of space in the park. There's a schedule for month-to-month spaces, which are the regulated spaces under the ordinance. Then there's a schedule where they list spaces subject to long-term leases, park-owned homes, and management-occupied homes, and then any vacant spaces. The purpose of the registration requirement is to enable the city to keep track of the status of spaces and the rents on the spaces, because depending on what's happening, either through a subsequent annual adjustment, the city wants to make sure the rents don't exceed what the ordinance allows. If a park owner comes in for a special rent adjustment, like a MNOI adjustment, it enables the city to have a check to make sure that the rents listed in the application are consistent with what the historical information is on file with the city. If spaces come off long-term leases, it's a way for the city to keep track of what the rents were, so we know what the last rent in effect under the lease is. During this last annual adjustment process, one of the park owners declined to provide the information on park-owned homes and leased spaces, contending the city had no ability to regulate those spaces, therefore they didn't have to provide the information. our response was the ordinance currently requires and the rules require that the park owners submit information on all spaces. But we thought we would go back and just refine the language to make crystal clear that the park owners have to disclose this information so that we can keep this historical record. Over time, staff has discovered that not all parks retain information over the years. And so the city-owned information, the city-maintained information is one way we've been able to track rents. And so we would just come back with some language that would refine the provisions of the ordinance and the rules.
I'm going to open it to public discussion. Public comment, I'm sorry. Ms. Dalton?
I think that we need to go along with the attorney and clarify the language so that all park managers and owners will abide by the law.
Ms. Sutton?
I would agree with that. We need the owners and the managers to cooperate, just like we're asking residents to cooperate.
Mr. Evans? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave the discussion for the commission.
It's either for Mrs. Crawford or Ms. Grayson. Is that park owner that didn't provide information in our building currently? Okay. Legally, you probably can't disclose it, but no, I was talking to the city attorney.
I'd rather not get into
Okay.
the details. I mean, our position is that's what the ordinance already says, but we'll be happy to refine the language.
Let me ask the question.
Sure.
Why didn't they want to give you the records? Hey, this is pretty
Because they
simple.
don't feel like the city should be entitled to information that is a park-owned home and any private document they have between their renter.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to motion for option number 1.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm actually going to see if we can take a break. So if anybody needs to go to the bathroom, get a drink of
Thank you.
water, we can take about, what do you want to take, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What do you want to do? 10 minutes? Okay, yeah. So we'll be back at,
It's cold up here.
yeah, 3:05.
Randy, I need your jacket. It's cold up here.
Excuse me. Oh, excuse me, what? What's going on? Testing, okay. If I can have everyone take their seats, we're gonna get started here again. I have a beer waiting on me. Okay, Jennifer, did you want to start with item number 9? Are we on subject number 9?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This item, like many others, have been before the commission for decades. In this one, deals with the Mobile Home Rent Review Commission. And it's due to reoccurring issues, and it becomes challenging to find and fill and maintain the 5 positions with qualified candidates willing to serve and understand the complexity of the cases that come before the commission. In order to address vacant positions, we changed the process to where instead of at-large appointments made by the council as a whole, each council member had to appoint someone into the position so they, could find a friend, or that in the future didn't become their friend because they had them on the commission, and or someone in the community that showed an interest to be a neutral party to assist the city in the mobile home residency law in the admin rules here in town. We still then had some issues getting people willing to serve. And so in 2021, council authorized a stipend of $75 to see if we could stimulate additional interest. And I don't think it's the $75 that got 5 of you here. I think it's because of the at-large appointments. And so some of the stakeholders raised the item again regarding what we should do with the commission. The options presented have been suggested by the stakeholders and have been presented in prior biennial reviews. One is that the city council holds an evidentiary hearing to consider the application, and the commission is eliminated. Number 2, the council hears the application, and these, of course, are in terms of special rent adjustment, MNOI, NOI applications, and then there would be an appeal to the hearing officer. The commission would be eliminated in this one. Option number 3, the commission would be eliminated, and then the hearing officer would hold the evidentiary hearing to consider the application, and then it would be final. And then option 4 is to retain the existing language of the ordinances which we have in place at this time. Stakeholder comments are listed on page 22 of your packet. And then just to let you know, we have no recommendation. We're just requesting that you consider the options as presented.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open up for public comment. Ms. Dalton?
This is a tough one. I know it's been hard to get commissioners, and we really appreciate your volunteering to serve. Believe me, we do. I do not think the city council wants to take on another task to add to what they're already doing. So I don't think those first ones are going to go for city council. I think that the best way we can get a fair hearing, an impartial hearing, is by having representatives from the community, like you, who can listen to both sides, to all the stakeholders, and make a fair and just decision. I do not think that hiring a hearing officer or multiple hearing officers, as one of the stakeholders suggested, is cost effective, because those costs, which can for a retired judge or someone run like $400 an hour, those costs get passed on to the residents, and we can't afford it. Park owners may be able to afford it, we can't. So I recommend no change. Thank you.
Joseph?
Hi again. I'm so aware that it's been really problematic to find people to populate the Rent Review Commission in the past. And I'm kind of curious what prompted you guys to accept the position. It's kind of a tough one, and I understand that. And I'm wondering if you guys might have any insights or suggestions that might help alleviate this problem in the future. Might also be worthwhile to consult with other cities and find out how they've dealt with this problem. I'm sure we're not the only ones. What? Oh, they're up there. Yes. Thank you. Meanwhile, even given the difficulty of finding appropriate candidates, I continue to believe that the MRRC is still the best option available. It seems to me that having several individuals hear the various cases and examine the evidence and the arguments and to consider the staff advice and recommendations lends more of a chance for a balance between economic wisdom, fairness, and compassion than relying on a single hearing officer. I also think that City Council would be so busy with other matters that they would be hard-pressed to devote the time and energy to study the rent control issues to the depth that may be required. Plus, I know they don't want the job. I just really wish you would retain the MRRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Shipley?
Well, this is like my probably third time coming to one of these, but I agree with number 4, and I will volunteer to assist in any way I can to help our community. Because I don't think Yucaipa is going to be ready for the influx once these huge corporations take over these mobile home parks for the homelessness that it's going to cause.
Thank you. Janet Greenwood?
My name is Janet Greenwood. I'm here representing Northview of sorts. I was called to this last evening about that, and here I go. And when the people aren't here that I talked to, I said, write me a letter. I got 7 letters, because I didn't get to the whole part because there's just too many people. I was dying. It was 9 o'clock at night. Anyway, I'm going to read these, and that's it. And it's the same stuff why who's left, why we're here, okay? To whom it may concern, I'm a disabled veteran. I live on $1,060 a month. I receive Social Security disability, and my yearly increases are very small. If my monthly rent is doubled, I will be homeless with nowhere else to go. I have been living in Northview Estates for approximately 20 years because of reasonable space rent. So please take into consideration my concern as other people living here with the same problem. Do I have another minute? Oh, half a minute?
You still have a minute. I didn't know if you were.
Okay, this is the other one. This is from somebody who just moved in, and she said, I love it here. And then she heard this. Last night, I had people that are ready they were folding up. It's awful to say this. To whom it may concern, my name is, I'm not going to say her name. I have just been here less than a month. The only reason I moved in here is I was assured the rent never increases more than $10 or so a year, and was under control by law because of rent control. I live off Social Security and would never be able to survive with doubling the rent. We were said the rent was just going to be doubled. I used my only savings to buy this home, and she paid $65,000 for that home, which is what do you call it? But it fixed up because we got a guy in the community that really does a beautiful job, if you know him. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'm going to call Carol Burris. Carol Burris. Harold Foster. He left too. Thank you, Gloria. Okay, there's no further public comment, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the commission for discussion and voting.
Well, I guess we're voting on ourselves. So I would go with option 4, retain the existing language of the ordinance and rules pertaining to procedure for city approval of special rent adjustments, et cetera. And I vote for option 4. And I want to apologize to city staff and the city attorney of me giving my resume earlier, but I knew this was on the agenda. Because if I was, there's probably 100 people here, I'd go, well, who are these commissioners? Who's Miller? Who is it? Who are these people? So that's why I gave my resume. I won't do it again. But I just want to know that they have people on this side of the bench. They're going to make fair decisions and think of things as a community volunteer. It's the only reason I'm doing it personally is to give back to the community that I love. So I just wanted to say that in deference to you guys. I know you didn't want to hear my resume again, so my apologies on that. But I make a motion to approve option 4.
I second that motion for option number 4. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The next item is number 10. One of the stakeholders asked if the city can simplify the MNOI rent adjustment process. I would love to be able to say we can do that, but unfortunately, the ordinance and the rules reflect a great coordinated effort over a number of years to enact provisions which are consistent with federal and state judicial opinions and ensure a process to give everybody involved the opportunity to participate and understand why the decisions are made and how they are made. So staff does not have any recommendations. The nature of the MNOI rent adjustment process depends on, quite frankly, what the proposed increase is and the documentation that the park owner submits. And based on that, then the staff has to review and analyze it under various legal principles. And sometimes that requires a much more extended process because additional information has to be obtained. So we don't really think there is a way to do that given the nature of the beast, so to speak, but we are presenting it to you.
So I'm going to go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Ms. Dalton?
I have to concur with staff on this issue. It's way too complicated to try and make any changes at this time.
Joe Sutton?
Well, clearly the MNOI procedures are the most painful, at least they seem to me to be the most painful and difficult. And I don't know if this applies at all to that, but I'm going to throw this in. I would ask you to consult the booklet of administrative rules regarding study sessions and addressing interpretation and modification of those rules. I think that in these kinds of settings, it seems to me that those sections of the rules provide the commission with the capability of pausing the proceedings and temporarily suspending the rules in order to convene brief study sessions. I'm not sure what that would look like, but this would allow for short communicative exchanges in place of or in addition to the 3-minute monologues allowed under public comment rules. It seems to me that those monologues are inadequate for the purposes of this kind. I think that might be so for MNOI hearings. I don't know. I really don't know. But I would like to see more of an opportunity for exchange and rebuttal and re-argumentation and that sort of thing. Communication, I think, is what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I think the rules have to stay the same. I think follow the ordinance as it stands.
Mr. Evans? You're going to pass. Okay, I'm going to open the floor up to the commission for discussion and voting. So being a commissioner who's gone through the whole MNOI process myself, it is a very lengthy process. I mean, how it is kind of, I think I explained it to Commissioner Miller earlier, that it's almost like a hearing. So a court hearing. So you're hearing evidence, you're hearing both sides. I think we managed to get it into 2 days. Most trials last weeks. So it's as short as it can be. I think at this point right now, it is a complicated animal. And so I'm just gonna make a motion to keep the ordinance the same. I really am with everyone else. I don't know how to approach it and make it a shorter process.
I second that emotion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. This item is a waiver of the filing fee. We've had stakeholders request a decrease in rents based on discontinuance or reduction of a service or amenity. Park application requires a $1,750 application fee. And they're requesting that if residents want to come forward with this type of application, that the fees be waived. Since the adoption of the rent control in 1991, the City Council has established an application appeal fee to offset the costs associated with processing an application. As depicted on the screen, you can see that the costs relating to these type of cases, whether it be a meet and confer, which the last one cost the city $5,250, or an MNOI application was $190,000. This is not an inexpensive process because, as the chairperson has attested to, it is like a court hearing. We have experts here, we have attorneys here, and the overall process of trying to review the applications submitted and go through the overall process takes staff time, energy, and experts. This is in terms of if there was a loss of amenity or a reduction. The concern is that if the fee is just waived, and we could have issues, increase in the number of applications that come before staff and or the commission and council. Could potentially increase the Galan fees passed on to residents if the council upholds the decision of the commission. And full reimbursement to the city is not guaranteed since rent control fees are impacted January 1st of each year and collected the January 1st of the following year. Residents that were involved in the case may no longer live in the park, and then there would be no rent control fees collected, or someone new is coming in that has to cover that cost. And overall, just an increase in staff time. The $1,750 doesn't even come close to the actual cost of putting these applications in, but the council has felt in years past that it's a fair fee to encourage people, to make sure they know what they're doing prior to submittal, or they're confident and that they're submitting this application, because once we receive it, we have very short timelines in the ordinance and rules on processing these kind of applications. So the recommendation is that you do not amend the fee or provide a waiver or deferment.
I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up to open comment at this point. Ms. Dalton?
I do realize that it costs money to have these kind of hearings. And I do realize also that the person who is requesting or would be requesting a reduction in rent due to loss of amenities is not the city, it's not the park owner, it's the resident. The resident does not have access to the attorneys, experts, etc., that City Hall does or that park owners have. We are on our own. I could not, if I had to, come up with $1,750 to file an application if all of a sudden my park owner decided to shut down the clubhouse or the swimming pool and I couldn't use it anymore. So it's not equitable because it is not considering the fact that the residents do not have access to the assets resources and advice of City Hall or the park owners. All we are asking is that if the fee cannot be waived, then defer it until the end of the process is completed and let the loser pay the fee. Thank you.
Ms. Sutton.
Thank you. This item presents some substantial problems for many residents of the Yucaipa parks. In a significant number of parks around the city, clubhouses, pools, etc., are either closed or just unusable. The use of these amenities is part of the rent. In many cases, the owner or manager takes advantage of the fact that the only way residents can reduce their rents to compensate for this loss of amenities is by paying a $1,750 filing fee to the city so they can present their case. Some owners know that this is a prohibitive amount of money for the residents and use that as an opportunity to simply ignore the problem. YMRA suggests that the filing fee be waived or deferred and later be paid by the loser after the matter has been resolved by the city. I think waiving the fee is probably unrealistic, but deferring it may be worth considering. I don't know how that would happen, but I know Jennifer could come up with something. And I would certainly welcome any suggestions from anybody to help bring justice to these affected residents. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor now to the commissioners for discussion and voting.
I have a couple of questions. Is there no recourse if I'm paying for X amount of dollars for something and it's not available to me? Is there no recourse for that residents can go back on other than paying the money? I'm asking a legal question, I guess.
Well, that was the purpose of having that provision in the ordinance, that it would give the residents the ability to petition basically for a rent decrease on the basis that an amenity was removed. The financial issue that is being brought to your attention is the residents are saying we would like to be able to defer the filing fee or have it waived.
I understand that, but if somebody has a complaint against there's no pool or the clubhouse is not open, can they not file a complaint with the city and let the code enforcement person go out there and check that?
We do that. Right now, if we get a call, you know, in the last couple of years, it's been really tough because of COVID. We've had a lot of calls regarding the pools and the clubhouses, but when we do get a heads up that, okay, now that, you know, at least Yucaipa for the last year, we've been open. Our city's a little bit different than some, you know, city halls are still closed down, but now we're out of COVID. We typically then will send a letter or reach out to the park manager at no charge, just to reach out to say, hey, you need to start getting your pool open, ready to go, or clubhouse. And, you know, because residents are starting to voice concerns regarding this issue, which can be a loss of amenity. So we do try to do that initial nudge. I don't think we've had many lately. Now that COVID, we're kind of through the other end of COVID, I don't think some of those are still shut down.
Do we have a way of sending a letter to the park managers who they can refer with a copy to the owner or something saying, hey, you've got so many days to get this cleaned up, fixed up, opened up, or whatever?
What we
and then
do,
we fine you so many dollars a day or week or whatever, like they do in code enforcement?
we can't fine them, but we do alert code enforcement because it's a part of the annual inspection, a part of Title 25. So Kim and or I will then meet with Kelly and her team, and they'll go out and they'll start doing the review if we hear that they're not reopening the amenity.
Yeah, but the question is, if you've got no recourse, you know, and you come out and say, okay, the pool is filthy and it's not going to open, when are you going to open it? I don't care, I'm not going to open it. What are you going to do to me? You're not, if you can't fine him or put a lien against him or do something to him, he's got no incentive, or the park owner's got no incentive to get it corrected. That's what I'm asking. Is there no, there's got to be some recourse that the individual can take or the city can take to say, hey, you either open it or you can't collect rent, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. I don't know what the legal ramifications are, but there's got to be some way of making that park owner or the manager say, we got to do it, or we lose, tax exempt or something.
Well, there's only 4 parks in town that are tax exempt. The rest are profit parks. And I think we've had successes by reaching out to the parks when we're notified by the residents. We don't typically get that return phone call. So I feel like the mechanism of, okay, we're reaching out on behalf of the resident because they're alerting rent control, then we're tying in code enforcement. I feel like we are addressing the concerns that are raised. Now, if someone continues to refuse to open the pool, then we'll start working with the attorney, park resident, if they have one. And typically in the past, to tell you the truth, I've reached out to YMRA. Now, for the last 8 to 10 years, YMRA, the makeup has changed over time. In the past, YMRA, and I think Shirley started to do it, and I think Tony tried to do it for a while, is they did fundraisers. There's over 4,200 people residents living in the mobile home parks. They did fund drives. They did go through YMRA, and they did have an attorney, and they did supply an application or come up a part of an MNOI or a fair return. We've never, since I've been in, I don't think the city in its history have ever had a loss of amenity application. But in the past, YMRA served as that representative for the 4,100 people living in, and they did their penny drives. They did fundraisers. They did pay for their attorneys and their experts. And so if times are changing, and I know Shirley is doing a ton of educational campaigns. I think Tony has done that too, because the best armed resident is one that takes the time to kind of educate themselves and make sure then they kind of report as a unit or a group. And so the only concern staff has is the deferment option would be nearly impossible because the people who live in a park throughout the year change. So if an application takes a half a year or months and people move out, how does the city ever go back and collect that cost? And a defer or just waiving of it, who knows how many, if anyone can submit it, who knows how many applications we're gonna get and the costs associated with that. It
I'm
would
not,
just be
I'm
a-
not
a
for
drain.
reducing the fee.
Okay.
I'm just saying if, I've been notified by the code enforcement that if I don't do correction, they're gonna fine me $250 a day, and if that keeps going, they're gonna put a lien on my property. So what I'm saying is, if that park owner knows that he's got amenities for the park owners cannot use, can we not say fine him X amount of dollars a day or put a lien on his property if you don't do that? I'm just asking. I'm sorry?
Could I respond real quickly to what Jennifer was talking about?
Let me
from-
finish with,
Yeah,
Wait,
please.
wait a minute, wait, before anybody makes any comment. It's only open for discussion right now for the commission, so I know, Shirley, you want to speak, but
I only wanted to respond to what she said about YMRA, that's all. So if you want me to wait on
Okay,
that, I will.
yeah, if you can wait until after we're done with this item, please.
I have another question.
Do you,
Go ahead, Ms.
Okay.
Let Ms. Grayson speak first.
in the normal private property situation, like if my landscaping is not maintained, code enforcement can potentially send me a notice and say you need to trim your trees or whatever.
Right.
Mobile home parks are a little bit different because overall the state is responsible for the condition inside the parks. Sometimes cities take over as enforcement agency, and that's what Yucaipa has done, but there are still limits on what the city can and can't do. If it's simply a question of the clubhouse is not open, I mean, the building's there, it's usable, but the park owner closes it, there's nothing legally that the city has the ability to do because that's not part of what the law would allow the city to do. On the other hand, if, say, the sewage disposal system in a park is creating a public nuisance, there are things that the city, if it's in the enforcement agency or the state can do. Sometimes they can revoke the permit to operate or suspend it and order the park owner not to collect rent, and that's to get them to clean up the park. But that's the extreme situation where there is a health and safety issue.
Right.
These in-between situations where the park residents are supposed to be getting an amenity that they're not getting, that's what we are all trying to deal with. There's nothing that the city really can do in that situation, other than as we've tried to do through the ordinance. Yeah, well, if the pool, it can either be, it's a health hazard, in which case there's remedies that may be pursued, but if it's, and eliminating the pool, I mean, filling it in, that has to be done a certain way. But simply not allowing the residents to be able to use something that they are theoretically paying for, that's the difficult one.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if they have a clubhouse and they keep it closed, but maybe the residents wants to go in and drink coffee, play a game of pool, sit and chat and watch TV or something for half hour, and the park owner is denying that, or the manager is denying that, there should be some recourse that somebody could do other than just saying, well, it's a state problem, or it's this problem or that problem. And I'm not blaming the city, I'm not saying the city needs to take on that responsibility, but at some point in time, the residents got to have something, recourse to go to and say, hey, I'm paying rent for this. If you're buying a car or renting a car from Enterprise down there and it's got no windshield, you're not going to drive it very long, or you're going to say, hey, I want a windshield, I'm paying for that. And that's where I'm going on that. And I'm not saying we'd eliminate the 1750, but there just should be some recourse that residents can go to. That's my speech.
That's okay. Maybe that's something later on for, we can have a discussion about. Mr. Chu, I think you had a question?
Yes, I have a question about the fee. Who pay for is the park owner pay for the fee and pass on to the residents?
For this particular application, it would be, the 1750 would come from whoever's submitting the application to the city. So in this case, it'd be the resident in the park or residents of that park would be submitting the application along with the 1750.
All right, Commissioner Miller, you had a comment?
Yes, I'd like to recommend, or make a motion that we do not, we don't recommend any change to the ordinance or rules pertaining to waiver / deferment of the 1,750 application appeal fee for residents.
Commissioner Regan?
See, I have a different point of view. I believe that this is like a big part of our community. They're tax-paying citizens in our community, and as the city, it is your job to represent them. So I do believe that they shouldn't have to pay $1,750 just to make a complaint to a city that's already supposed to be representing them on the fact that they're collecting taxes from them. That's just my opinion.
I sort of agree with the gentleman in the end.
So some. I second that. There was no recommendations, right? Okay, so you made a motion.
Yeah, I made a motion that, to keep it as same, the 1750 application fee, and for the appeal, that would be done. So option, well, it's no option, but that's the recommendation.
Am I allowed to make a recommendation?
I mean, I agree. I think the fee is high, but I do understand the work that goes into it because I have sat at an MNOI hearing. So I do know there's a lot of work involved. I mean, I know when you're filing things, just when I have to go to court sometimes just for my cases, there are filing fees that are associated with that. There are fees and costs for those types of things. So I understand the fees for filing documents for a hearing. With that being said, I do agree that the fee is a little high. I do understand the city's work involved in that. I'm not trying to downplay it. I don't think I can really make a decision whether to keep the ordinance the same or not. But there isn't any other options. That's.
Can we put an option in there where the loser pays, like someone suggested? If they file a complaint, if I'm a resident and I file a complaint and pay the $1,700 and it goes to wherever, courts or, whatever they want, arbitration or something, and the park owner loses, then they pay the reimburse the fee? Is that possible?
What? I guess what I'm going to.
I don't mean to open up a Pandora's
I'm
box.
sorry,
here, but
yeah, we're not
yeah,
open
but
up
I'm
public
just-
comment at this point. But pertaining to waiver or deferment of the fees, I'm sorry, sir, but we're not open to public comment, and we have to be respectful. I understand, but I'm giving you time to talk. You've had time to discuss this. Well, if you wanted to speak, you would have filled out one of these. I would have called you up and you would have been able to speak. So here are the rules. Here are the rules. So we open this up for public comments. You make a public comment, and then once it's closed, then it's our turn to speak. So it's not a discussion. To continue, as far as the waiver and deferment, I believe there should be a waiver, not a waiver, but a deferment, maybe something that can be paid in installments because it is so high. But like I said, there is no options right now, so I'm gonna go let Mr. Miller speak.
Well, I didn't get a second on the motion, so I think it just dies, right? Okay, so, well, the other thing about the fees, we've been pretty amiable with every decision this afternoon, clearly. But the city has costs that they have to incur to do the things that they need to do. And unless they're doing an annual fee review, I don't know if you do it biannual or every 2 years, of all your fees, all your admin fines and everything, it could go up maybe, but maybe not. I don't think with the tenor of what I'm hearing, that $1,750 is, nobody wants to go above that. But Jennifer, do you guys do as a city, does it do a review of fees every year? That would increase or decrease?
This fee hasn't been in the user fee. This fee has been the same for at least, I'd say, 16 to 20 years. The council hasn't raised this fee. And like I said, it's not just staff time, it's postage, it's notification, it's attorney review. So, and it's just the cost of pulling it in because we're gonna get this application and then we're gonna get Amy and then we're gonna have to do the noticing and in the distribution. And it's not, in the sense, from an individual standpoint, the $1,750, like I said in the other cases, is far less than the actual cost. My only concern is a deferment, how to track people down. We have that issue with code enforcement, and solid waste. I mean, to track people down to pay a fee, and is it the $1,750, or are we looking that we would charge actual fee? And I doubt no one's even recommending that, but if there's 50 spaces in the park, what's the mechanism to go back and get that fee? And if people move, then it's kind of a moot point. So if it's going to be waived.
Yeah, I mean, I'll stick with my original motion to not make any changes to what we're currently doing. But, it does cost to do things at times, even though it's hard to say that. But, if you have it, I don't think you're getting a lot of these, are we, Ms. Crawford? I mean, are we getting a ton of these coming across the desk?
We haven't had one loss of amenity, and I want to make sure we're clear, and I was hoping Amy may be speaking on it. It would be if like the park completely buried the pool and turned it into a parking lot. It'd be like the park completely ripping down the common or the clubhouse and not replacing it. We are not talking about, oh, they don't let us in the park, or they don't let us in the clubhouse for a certain period of time. Oh, they're no longer heating the pool. It'd be questionable on how you do that. So say we get the application, then 2 weeks later, okay, the park owner then lets people in the clubhouse. So then do we go back and then they do a fair return or rent adjustment on that? Because that starts the whole, it doesn't trigger just one thing. It will trigger multiple items. And so I feel like no cost to anybody, that when a resident calls the city, and Kim, she can attest because she takes the initial call.
I agree with you.
We reach out to the park owner, we reach out to the park manager, and then we start tying in code enforcement. And unless Shirley is telling me she's hearing something different, or the park's telling me that they buried a pool, I haven't heard that.
Not buried, they're just filthy.
I don't think it should be free, by no means. I think they need to pay a filing fee. And whatever the fee is what it is. My only thing is, there should be some recourse that the city or somebody could do, file a complaint with the state, and the state take care of it, because of and I'm just talking about things that are on ongoing. If they close the clubhouse for 6 weeks to paint, that's a different story.
We're talking about loss of use, though, not an inconvenience.
Well.
So, not closing a clubhouse
If they've lost the
paint.
use for, it's been locked up for, say, 7 or 8, 9, 10 months, not in there when COVID is going on, but I'm talking about just as a general rule, you can't ever get in there. Or the summertime is here, it's 103 degrees and the pool's closed and it's green, that's telling you somebody's.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
There is recourse through the state for residents that do have complaints, such as the ones that have been mentioned.
Okay.
Residents that are owners of their coach are able to file a complaint with the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Okay, I didn't know that. So do they know that? Is that public knowledge to them, or can we
Yeah,
get
the
that
city-
out to them in some way?
Absolutely, the city has noticed
Then that's fine.
all
Thank you.
residents and park
Appreciate
owners.
it.
I had one last thing, Ms. Crawford or anybody. I would assume when the fee was put in, the application fee, that the council wants the ordinance to pay for itself, as it says on our staff report. And so if we're gonna do these things, and they have to be cost effective to be able to manage what needs to be done, it's not, don't look at it so much as this fee. It's a processing thing that needs to be done, that the city isn't making a bunch of money on it, and when you see fees, people think that. But realistically, it has to pay for itself what we're doing. And I don't think it's aberrant or it's a huge fee to do personally. That's my motion, that I want to leave it. If I don't get a second, that's fine, but that's where I'm at on it, and then
Well, I'm actually going to second your motion now, after hearing Jennifer's talk about what that fee entails. So when I heard filing fee, I'm thinking it's just a filing fee. It doesn't explain that there's also administrative costs going in that. So postage, paper, whatever has to be done on that part. So it's more, it is a filing fee, but it also has administrative costs lumped into it. So it doesn't seem as extreme to me as it did before. So I'm going to go ahead and second your motion to keep the ordinance the same, or keep the filing fee in place. Commissioner Regan, you had something to say?
Yeah, kind of. It's just hard for me to understand when we're talking about raising rent $38 and then we expect them to pay $1,750 to pretty much make a complaint or a formal complaint. To me, it kind of doesn't make sense really. And then we go into talking about how it's $190,000 cost for a whole hearing and all that. Like, at that point, it was $1,700 to be honest. And we are supposed to be taking care of our community, but that's just where I stand on it.
Because the 1750, I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, if it's a true loss of amenity, what goes on in that, we have to make a determination of what that cost of that amenity should be, and then the base rents in that park are adjusted. So it's not just, you kind of act, it's like a simple process. It's not a simple process, because then we have to set by resolution the new base rents. And then It's in that, I think.
So there's nothing saying what these amenities are worth each month?
No.
The process is intended to address something that is more than what we call a de minimis change. As Jennifer said, it's if the pool is rendered unusable, if the clubhouse is converted to offices, if the laundry facilities are eliminated. The idea is, I want to say almost something tangible. Because, you know, there will be disagreements if the park owner reduces the number of times that they clean the clubhouse. This isn't dealing with that. And because what the ordinance requires is a quantifiable way to evaluate how that has impacted what the park owner is spending and how that has affected what the residents are spending. And we've not had one, but we anticipate that if an application were submitted, the city would have to retain an expert to evaluate the effect of that elimination of the amenity or the service, just as the park owner would, and in theory, potentially the residents would. So it's not just we get the application. That's what Jennifer was trying to explain. The city would get the application, there would be noticing costs, there would be newspaper advertisement costs, but there would be far in excess of that in terms of legal analysis. If there is the need for an expert, how much they would charge. And as you can see from that one slide, the MNOI adjustments have been quite significant depending on what's involved. So in the larger picture, $1,750 is not that much. That isn't to say that it isn't a hardship on residents who are on limited incomes. It's just we have not been able to come up with a way to defer it as is being discussed. How does that get collected down the road? Who does the city go after? What costs are incurred in having to go after people, or, you know, how would that be implemented in the future? It makes it very complicated. And there are costs associated with those techniques as well, or those issues. So that, I think, I don't want to speak for staff, but I think on balance, that is what has gone into the prior recommendations over the years, that there not be a fee waiver or deferral. Right. I mean, there's no good answer to lessen that impact.
Just to answer, it's in the staff report. The $1,750 was decided by council in 2007, and it hasn't been changed since.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
Reagan.
Okay, this one is the selection of a resident representative. This was brought up by some stakeholders. Currently, the ordinance requires that the residents of each mobile home park to annually elect by a majority vote with 1 vote per space, a resident representative to receive all notices required by the ordinance. Of the 41 mobile home parks we have in the community, only 7 parks have a resident representative. In the 2017 biennial review, determined that if a resident representative or park contact is not established, all notices required by the ordinance shall be posted in the clubhouse, park office, in one other location accessible to the residents. I would like to note that the resident representative in this situation per the ordinance is more for like day-to-day type communication where we're hearing some issues going on in the park, or we have some questions that we want to get some further details specific to that park or residents in that park, we typically reach out to the resident rep for that kind of information. When there's a park files a capital improvement application, a special rent adjustment, either an MNOI or fair return, typically in the past, either the residents in that park voted on YMRA to represent them, or they chose a majority person to speak on behalf specifically to that application. So it's kind of in tandem of how this plays out. I realize in what was brought up by the stakeholders that it is, you know, it's burdensome to walk around. Some parks have 100 and something spaces in them, and if every year there's not a lot of interest going on in the park, this person who already made this kind of commitment to be the day-to-day point of contact, it feels like we're putting this burdensome requirement on them to kind of go around and get reelected. And so there are some options that are being presented for consideration that we can take to council. Option one is to amend the ordinance and change the term once elected for annual 3 to 4 years. Election could be held at any time during the term if a representative resigns or there's people don't like how that person's representing them, then they overturn their appointment. Option two would be to eliminate the term altogether. Once elected, election can be held at any time during the term if the representative resigns or is challenged. Option three is just to retain the existing language. However, it doesn't seem like it's very popular because, you know, if we only have 7 parks with a representative in there, it's that commitment level isn't there, so maybe we should look at making it easier for those people who are willing to commit their time freely to be the voice within that park on day-to-day options. But if no resident, like I said, we did change it in a previous biennial review, if no resident comes forward at being a representative of the park, or if we have an application, then city staff will go into the park and or work with the park owner to post the notices if we have an application or we have issues that we need to alert the people living in the park.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment at this time. Ms. Dalton?
Jennifer pretty clearly established what the problem is. We have a lack of interest or a lack of knowledge that this person is required. The managers don't let the park residents know that they're supposed to every year in January tell the city that they have a park rep. And I didn't know it when I lived in my park. I didn't know it for 10 years that we were supposed to have a park representative. So that's one problem. The other problem is the difficulty. One of our parks in the area has 300 spaces. Now, granted, you only have to have 51%, so that means you got of covered spaces, those that are regulated by rent control. But it's still, if there's a 300 space park, most of those you're going to have to go to get the 51% votes for you. So I support recommending option 2, which allows the park rep to, or the candidate for park representative to go around and get the vote one time, then unless they resign or are otherwise incapacitated or someone challenges them, they don't have to be reelected. I think it would simplify things. It would get a park representative in place. It's not an onerous task. They just take communication from the city, basically, and pass it on to the residents.
Joe Sutton.
Well, this item is very dear to my heart. Item 12 addresses resident representatives, and I urge you to select option 2 in place of the current requirements. As a representative of my own park and a person with mobility issues, I find the voting requirement to be extremely physically taxing. It requires me to walk from door to door to deliver, explain, and collect ballots from each residence. Obviously, that's an essential part of the initial process of selecting someone for the position. But making it a step that needs to be repeated annually seems redundant and unnecessary and very painful. I think that once a representative is selected, he or she should retain that position indefinitely until he or she resigns or someone challenges for the job. I have to tell you, as a representative of my park, nobody comes to me in my park and asks for anything, but I have let everybody know if they see my notice, I handwrite a notice. If I get something from the city that seems important, I handwrite it and I put it by the mailboxes and I tell everybody my number's on there, the city's number's on there, call if you want information. I don't know what else to do beyond that. I don't go door to door to tell everybody what's going on, but I tell them how to access me, and I leave it at that. And the truth is, they really don't care. I'm sorry to say, they're either too busy with day-to-day living or whatever, or they're uneducated, or there are many reasons why they're not seeking information. And it's very frustrating to me. And I would sure like to see the process simplified so that hopefully we can get representatives in every park. We need it. And I would appreciate you going with number 2 with no term limit.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton.
Thank you.
I'm going to call up Irene Vasquez. Is she gone? She's gone. Okay, so did you want to make a, what's your name, sir? Robert Babcock. Come on up. Robert Babcock.
I live at Lakeview. I live in Lakeview Mobile Estates. For 2 years now, they have been working on, we had a perfectly good swimming pool. They yanked it out. They changed the clubhouse, put new windows in it. All of this without building permits. So now the health department is not allowing them to continue on with the swimming pool. I don't have $1,750 to be able to pay for a complaint. You'd think the city would at least come and talk with them.
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and open discussion for the commissioners. So I guess I'll start. I am going to make a motion for option number 2. I think.
I second that emotion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
We're almost there, you guys, I
We're
promise.
almost.
Okay, item number 13 is the public notice, email notice for comment for the biennial review process. Currently, the ordinance does not address noticing requirements as it pertains to the biennial review. As a matter of past practice, since even prior to me in 2004, staff has notified MET, WMA, park owners, and YMRA so they could submit proposed additions or modifications as a part of this overall process. Staff does believe, though, with the changing times in the amount of people involved, that it would be appropriate to amend the code to improve noticing of the process to all stakeholders. We're recommending that we say the biennial review should be reviewed by the City Council in odd number of years to determine whether it is still appropriate or whether there should be any modifications of its provisions. And then add the following text: the rent administrator shall issue notice of the biennial review and submittal deadline to the resident representative, or if no represented, posted pursuant to 1520-060, which is in the park at the 3 locations, and advertised once in the local adjudicated newspaper. That's all I have.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. So it's going to be Ms. Dalton.
YMRA does appreciate the proposed change. Because as Jennifer pointed out to me earlier, because we were not notified early enough, she came out with a notice, they gave us a good 10 days or more. Unfortunately, we had our newsletter already printed and out for distribution before the first of the month, so we couldn't put it in our newsletter to let our residents know. So as a result, inaccurate information was put out both in posters in various places, flyers to the residents in the parks, and on social media, because the stakeholders, the parks were not notified in time. Had we gotten the notice before the first of the month, it would have been in our newsletter, but we didn't. So this change will keep that from happening again.
Just to clarify on this one, this would notice the initial, we sent it out in December, hey, we're gonna start the biennial review, and we're in May. I mean, it takes a while once we get all the input that we start, working on the staff report and compiling all the information. So what we're talking about here is to say, hey, we're gonna kick off the biennial review. I think we gave about a month timeline for people to submit their comments. And Joe Sutton then brought it up, and I think she actually posted it in the paper, which made us kind of re-review this in general. Once we get all the input from the stakeholders, all their letters go into the packet, then noticing in terms of the packet will inform the stakeholders.
The main thing we needed was the date, and I
The
didn't
date of the meeting, but that's following up, which is this item. We got it out.
Yeah.
Tony would be so happy. 10 days.
I know, but
Prior,
it
in
was
the past, it was like 72
still
hours.
after the first of the month, so we didn't get it in the newsletter.
I didn't meet her cutoff period, but Tony's been grousing about that forever because typically it's like 72 hours, like a council packet.
Are we sending notices to every resident of parks?
No, and
No,
we
just-
won't be doing that because that's a mailing expense, but we will, in terms of the initial start, we'll post it and
Could we
we'll
ju-
work on all
could we
that.
send a flyer to the managers, let them post it by the mailboxes or something like that? Wouldn't that be a lot?
Yeah, that's the section of 1520-060 if the resident rep isn't available.
Okay, Joe Sutton.
Hello. I forgot to mention how grateful I am to city staff with helping me being the representative. I have so many questions and I go to them and they're so patient with me and I really appreciate it so much. So obviously a critical element of acquiring evidence and input from stakeholders is appropriate and timely notification of pending meetings and actions by the MRRC and the city. And I want to point out, first of all, that YMRA newsletter is only distributed in parks where there is a resident willing to volunteer to pass them out door to door. So there are a large number of mobile home residents who do not receive our newsletters. Secondly, please be aware that the email notification of the date and time for this meeting was sent after, well, we already talked about that. It missed our newsletter. So there was no way to inform the residents who do get the newsletter. It's also important to note that only the YMRA chairman was alerted about submitting written comments by a specified deadline, which again leaves out a significant number of residents. Now, Shirley notified me, and I hand wrote notices and put them up by the mailboxes for my residents to see that there was a deadline for submitting written submissions and inviting people to talk to me if they wanted help with that. That didn't go very far. We didn't get any submissions from anybody. But I support adopting the staff recommendation for improving the public notification process, including number one, publishing an announcement in the local paper, yes. Emails should be sent to all park representatives, assuming we get any. And we can then post handwritten notes and notices where our residents can see them.
Ms. Sutton,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, your
Time's
time.
up. Sorry. Thank you. And I think relying on the park park owners to post them, they put them under the table. They put them somewhere where nobody can see them. We need reps. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, did you want to? Okay, so we're going to close public comment and open it up for discussion with the commissioners. Anyone want to make a comment?
I have no comment. I make a motion, it stays the same. I make a motion, it stays the same. Is that what we're talking about?
Staff's recommendation is that we amend the code to add additional language to ensure that the residents get better notification.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I apologize.
So you approve staff's recommendation?
Right.
Okay.
I went to sleep there for a second.
I second that motion. Regan, oh, we both. It's a joint effort. Mr. Miller, Commissioner Miller, did you have a question? No, I'm good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
We're down to 2 items. Item 14 is property tax pass-through upon sale of park. Currently, increases in property taxes are addressed through the MNOI rent adjustment process. When operating expenses are determined for the base year and current year, any property taxes paid are included in the calculation. So that if there's an increase in property tax in the current year, then that will reduce current year net operating income, which may affect whether the park owner is entitled to a MNOI rent adjustment. As we understand this, we think this stakeholder is suggesting that if the park is sold and the property tax is reevaluated under the state constitution, that they be allowed to pass that increase on to the residents. The staff recommendation is we think it's already addressed appropriately in the MNOI rent adjustment process, and we do not recommend any changes.
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to open the floor to public comment. Ms. Dalton?
We concur with staff and recommend no changes.
Okay, you passed me. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Evans, this time you wanted to come up?
Yes, please. I think this is just a suggestion to avoid MNOIs because, I mean, it's going to be sometimes a big hit. And if it's the sales tax, and what we're suggesting is not all one time, maybe 3 years, spread the change in property tax over a 3-year term. So it's not one big smack on as if we went in for an MNOI. That's one suggestion that we've done that with park owners in other cities so that they don't pass it all one time because it's a big hit. It could be a big hit. And we want that to be avoided. And also, we wouldn't have to go through the MNOI every time with the new property tax.
Thank you. If there was no other further public comment, I'm going to close the public comments and open up to the commission for discussion and voting. So I'm going to go ahead and start, I guess. I'm going to make a motion to not make any changes to the ordinance. I believe that the ordinance already covers for property tax increase. I mean, I'm not sure if mobile home parks are, they're being turned around all the time. Property tax, I don't really understand.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, the last issue, this came up in the past. As the slide indicates, there's 41 mobile home parks in the city. Of those, 4 are owned by nonprofit entities. Nonprofit entities are not supposed to speak in terms of a fair return as they're not supposed to make a profit, but they are intended to earn enough income to pay the expenses. So Augusta Communities is the park owner of Valley View. They purchased, and they're a nonprofit entity, they purchased the park in 2000. By then, the ordinance had been in effect for quite a long time, which their own regulatory agreement, which is the document that regulates how much rent they can charge, acknowledge the existence of the ordinance and makes the rents for certain spaces or a certain number of spaces have to be considered affordable, either under the law or based on the ordinance, whichever is less. They did come in 2020 for an MNOI rent adjustment, which was granted in the amount of $60.21, which is quite large. They did ask for more. And part of their justification was that they claimed they had what they called borrower administrative expenses that covered a number of years, but totaled $266,000. The commission concluded at the time that they did not meet their burden of proof to justify that was warranted to be included under the ordinance and the rules. And so that was removed from the calculation. If that had been allowed, it would have resulted in a much higher increase. So Augusta Communities has proposed that because of what they consider to be unique expenses particular to nonprofit entities who own parks, that the city ought to develop a separate process to take that into account. The city's position is whatever financial arrangements are set up within the nonprofit entity, that's an internal matter. Bottom line is the city doesn't see a justification in terms of creating a separate process for nonprofit parks, and so we do not make that recommendation.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to public comments. Ms. Dalton?
I'm glad this is the last issue. I concur with staff. YMRA recommends no changes. And I want to thank all of you commissioners for being here. We really do appreciate your service.
Ms. Sutton? You're done. Mr. Evans? Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and close the floor for public comment and open discussion for the commissioners.
I make a motion, we leave it as is.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, so
I
that's our
just would
last.
like to say thank you for putting up with my,
And I do
stuff
want to
today.
let Ms. Dalton come back up. I think you did have a comment. I said you can discuss it at the end. It was about the YMRA. You had some comment about that.
Yeah. YMRA has in the past, I've only been chair for less than 2 years. My term is up in November, and I don't know if I'm going to get reelected or not. But anyway, in the past, they have provided funds to help parks or residents who needed legal assistance. They did pay a substantial amount of money in the Valley View case. They did do some fundraising in order to help the residents pay those bills for legal and expert fees. However, this last 2 years, well, you all know about COVID. We haven't been able to do any fundraising because we can't get out. We right now, in our legal fund, which is set aside for legal expenses to help residents and in a park issue, we only have $10,000. That doesn't go very far. So that's why we are kind of holding off going into the rent reduction issue, and that's why I've made the comment that the filing fee is somewhat expensive, because it's not just a filing fee. We would have to hire attorney, we would have to hire legal experts, financial experts. And like I said, $10,000 doesn't go very far in that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. So anyone have any questions? Yeah, you can have 2 minutes. What's your name, sir? Oh, Tony.
The issue is closed, but I just want to recap real quick. I know, Jennifer, you're just scared to death that if the filing fees were deferred, you're going to get this run on everybody trying to get rent reductions. We had proposed something in the past where the residents got to get 51% of the votes, and then if it were waived, or if it were deferred, they'd let the application process. Then in the end, whoever lost would be responsible for that $1,750. But in the end, if the residents did lose, it would go on record the same as a gallon adjustment or anything else. The bookkeeping is not hard. On all the expenses that we're talking about and cost, any cost associated with the mobile home park community is paid for in the maintenance of the ordinance. So these are things, they're not insurmountable. These are, if we could have a conversation someday, I'd like to sit down with you, and the residents need something to help them make their cases and get what they're supposed to have. Jennifer doesn't get the complaints, we get them. Lots of amenities have been shut down for people, and they're like, what do? We can't do anything. But there are some answers, there are some solutions. We've proposed some things that are really good. And I think the biggest thing when Jennifer and I speak is this fear of this run on everybody coming in and looking for rent reductions. That doesn't have to happen. This is legitimate, people need the help, and just for a future conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other questions or comments? You have one, ma'am. Can you come up to the podium, please? And what's your name, ma'am?
Carol Eden.
Okay, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I just have a question.
Can we just get, for the record, the spelling? Is it E-G-A-N?
No, it's Carol with an E at the end, and then Eden, E-D-E-N. So I started working at Valley View Mobile Home Park, plus I lived there for the last 2 years, but I started working there in January, and I had no idea this meeting was happening. I didn't know anything about the thing in November, and I'm wondering, what do I have to do to find out about these things? And I don't think we have a park representative, only because nobody knew we needed one. Or at least it wasn't, trickled down to the people that could vote.
Well, one of the items that we discussed today was giving notice, probably through the local paper. So if you don't have a park representative, this, you not getting notice doesn't happen in the future. So I don't know if, Jennifer, if you maybe want to elaborate on that, or maybe
Well, how do we
If
know?
you have an email, you can give it to Kim, and anything related to mobile home parks would be emailed to you.
Thank you. Then I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I found out the meeting was happening yesterday, and everybody said, "Whoa."
Maybe you should become a resident representative.
That's what I want to do.
Sorry, Shirley, I'm now working for you.
Valley View did have a representative, but she is no longer. She was representative during the MNOI hearing.
So that we can keep things on record and people can hear. So following your decision now, the staff will prepare the staff report that will be going to City Council, and then City Council will rule on each item. And then some things may change, some things may not. We'll see.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.